Seadragon's keel was laid on April 18, 1938 by the Electric Boat Company at Groton, Connecticut. She was christened and launched on April 21, 1939 and commissioned on October 23, 1939. Following a shakedown cruise off the United States East Coast and in the Caribbean Sea, Seadragon returned to New England and, on May 23, 1940, departed New London, Connecticut for the Philippine Islands. With Commander Submarine Division 17 or ComSub Div 17 embarked, she arrived at Cavite on November 30th and commenced training operations as a unit of the Asiatic Fleet. A year later, she prepared for overhaul, and by December 8, 1941, she had started her yard period at the Cavite Navy Yard. 2 days later, on December 10th, she and sister ship Sealion, moored together, were caught in an enemy air raid against Cavite. Sealion took a direct hit which demolished her and damaged Seadragon. The force of the explosion ripped off part of the latter's bridge. Fragments and splinters punctured her ballast tanks and conning tower, killing 1 and wounding 5. The heat of the explosion scorched her hull and blistered her black paint. Fires and explosions raged along the wharf. A nearby torpedo shop went up and flames reached toward a lighter loaded with torpedoes lying alongside Seadragon. Submarine rescue vessel Pigeon, however, disregarded the danger and moved in to tow Seadragon into the channel. She continued into Manila Bay under her own power. Temporary repairs were accomplished by Tender, Canopus, and Pigeon, and on the night of December 15th, Seadragon embarked members of the Asiatic Fleet staff. At midnight on December 16th, she headed out of Manila Bay. Escorted by destroyer Bulmer, Seadragon moved south via Surigao and Makassar Straits to Surabaya, where she disembarked her passengers, received further repairs exclusive of a paint job, and prepared for her first war patrol. On the 30th of December, the submarine departed the Dutch naval base and set a course for the South China Sea to intercept Japanese shipping off the coast of Indochina. On January 8th, she was in the sea lanes to Cam Ranh Bay. 2 days later, she sighted a destroyer, launched 2 torpedoes which missed, then watched as the destroyer continued on its course without attempting to attack the submarine. Seadragon remained in the area. Shortly after noon, a convoy was heard. 1/2 hour later, it was sighted, and the submarine began closing the last ship in the column. Shortly after 1300, she fired, missed, and again tried to close to firing position. Within an hour, however, the convoy was safely into Cam Ranh Bay. Seadragon retired eastward. After dark, while on the surface, recharging, she sighted a destroyer and attempted to slip away undetected. The destroyer spotlighted her. Seadragon went deep and worked her way eastward through 2 depth-charge attacks. She spent the morning of January 12th evading Japanese patrol planes. In the afternoon, she closed a 6-ship convoy, but as she came to periscope depth for a final check, she was spotted from the air. 3 salvos of bombs dropped close aboard, but Seadragon went deep and again made her way eastward, this time to investigate the cause of the plane sightings. She surfaced after 1800. No oil or air leaks were spotted, but her black paint was coming off the entire hull. Red lead undercoating showed from the waterline to the side plating and, in spots, on the bow planes and propeller guards. In shallow tropical waters, her original black paint was easily spotted against a light-colored background. With red showing, she stood out regardless of the color of the seabed. From then on, Seadragon ran at 140 feet between periscope exposures except in areas known to be patrolled by air when she went to 200 feet. On January 14th, she patrolled in the Cape Varela area. On January 15th, she shifted southward, and on January 16th, she stood off Han Lan to wait for a convoy. At 11:15, after a periscope observation, she was again spotted and bombed from the air. She returned to Cape Varela, where the depth of the water permitted a closer patrol to the shoreline. During the next 6 days, she sighted several targets but had no luck with her torpedoes. Early on January 23rd, she sighted a 4-ship convoy which she stalked until daylight, then attacked. At 08:06, she fired at the lead ship and scored with a hit on the port quarter. She then fired 2 at the ship and missed. The third and fourth ships ran off to the southeast and west respectively. The second ship moved in toward the first, then, listing to port and down by the stern, accompanied it as it ran for the beach. Seadragon surfaced and went after the third ship, but the appearance of an enemy plane forced her to break off the attack. The submarine remained off the Indochina coast for another 4 days, then set a course back to Luzon. On January 29th, she began patrolling along the coast from Subic Bay to Lingayen Gulf. On February 1st, she took up station off San Fernando and, early on the morning of February 2nd, conducted a night submerged attack on a 5-ship convoy. Tamagawa Maru, a 6,441-ton transport, the fourth ship in line, went down, depriving the Japanese occupation force of a number of the reinforcement troops and the equipment she carried. After the sinking, Seadragon patrolled southward. On February 4th, she arrived off Luzon Point, and that night she moved into Manila Bay. Mooring at 22:03, she completed loading torpedoes, radio equipment, and submarine spare parts at 0300 on February 5th. Shortly thereafter she moved out, rested on the bottom until after dark, then surfaced to take on 25 passengers at Corregidor. Among them were 17 members of the crew at cast or cryptanalysts and traffic analysts, including the commanding officer, Lieutenant Rudolph Fabian. At 1946, Seadragon got underway for the Netherlands East Indies. She arrived at Surabaya on February 13th. On February 21st, she left for Cilacap, whence she was ordered on to Australia. She reached Fremantle on March 4th and 2 weeks later again headed for the Indochina coast for her second war patrol. At the end of the month, she was diverted to Cebu to take on fuel and food for Corregidor. She unloaded 10 torpedoes and 250 rounds of 3-inch ammunition and took on 30 tons of food. At 20:53 on the 8th of April, she moored alongside Pigeon, to which she transferred fuel, offloaded 7 tons of food of the 30 she had taken aboard just for the besieged defenders, took on 23 passengers, including the last 17 members of the crew at cast, among them Honest John Leitweiler and Rufus Taylor, who as a Japanese language specialist was worth his weight in gold, and at 21:29 got underway to resume her patrol. She remained in the waters off southwestern Luzon and recommenced her patrol off the entrance to Subic Bay. On April 11th, she sighted several targets but was able to attack only one, a patrolling destroyer. At 17:20, she launched 3 torpedoes. 29 seconds later, the first torpedo exploded halfway to the target. The second broached and circled a beam of the target. The destroyer avoided the third. Seadragon changed course and went to 200 feet to avoid the circular and the expected depth charging. None of the depth charges were close, but a second destroyer soon joined the first, spotted the submarine as she came up for a periscope observation, and turned on her. Seadragon again went deep, then cleared the area. On April 12th, the submarine started south. On April 20th, she cleared Lombok Strait, and on April 26th, she returned to Fremantle. On her third patrol, the 11th of June to the 2nd of August 1942, Seadragon returned to the South China Sea. Arriving in her assigned area on June 27th, she patrolled along the Singapore-Hong Kong routes to the end of the month, then shifted to the Cape Varela area. On the morning of July 4th, she launched a torpedo at the leader of a 3-ship formation. The torpedo missed ahead. All 3 ships changed course towards Seadragon, with the leader proceeding down the torpedo track, firing her bow gun. Depth charges were dropped indiscriminately. 10 minutes later, the 3 had turned toward shore. Seadragon then shifted southward to intercept enemy traffic off Honlon Light. A few hours later, she sighted 2 freighters and fired tubes 1 and 2 at the lead ship. Her number 1 tube did not fire, and her number 2 torpedo missed astern. 2 more torpedoes were fired at the ships, but both missed. Enemy planes arrived on the scene soon afterward, and for over 2 hours aerial depth charges in salvos of 2 and 3 were dropped. Despite water depth of 75 fathoms or 450 feet, submarines were visible at any depth against the light-colored bottom. Seadragon survived the close bombing and continued her patrol. During the next week, she attempted to close several ships, but was unable to attain attack positions. On the night of July 11th, her losing streak ended. Just prior to midnight, she sighted smoke and opened out to the westward to overtake the target. At 01:56 on July 12th, she began her approach, and 14 minutes later she launched 3 torpedoes. 2 hit, but the third missed astern. A merchantman, Hayama Maru, began settling. By 02:19, she had been abandoned. Seadragon submerged and resumed her patrol 8 miles northeast of Cape Varela. On the morning of July 13th, Seadragon torpedoed and sank her second victim of the patrol. Shinyo Maru was hit approximately 50 feet abaft the beam and settled immediately. Seadragon moved out of the area and hunted along the Haina Varela routes for a few days. On July 16th, she was back off Cape Varela, and soon after 10:30 she fired on a 4-ship convoy. 5 minutes later, the torpedoes exploded on the beach. The 4 ships turned toward Seadragon and commenced firing their guns. Seadragon fired 2 more torpedoes and went deep. A few minutes later, she came to periscope depth. Only 3 ships remained on the surface. Hakodate Maru had been sunk. On July 20th, Seadragon departed the South China Sea and made her way south to Australia. On August 4th, she damaged the 6,816-ton Kembu Maru. On August 26th, she departed her Australian base for her 4th war patrol and again set a course for the coast of Indochina. On September 10th, she moved through Apo East Pass. On September 11th, her progress into the South China Sea was delayed by an emergency appendectomy performed successfully on Seaman Darrell Rector by pharmacist's mate Wheeler B. Lipes, the first such performed on a submarine. This incident was the subject of a Pulitzer Prize-winning account by Chicago Daily News reporter George Weller. In 2005, retired Lieutenant Commander Lipes was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal for saving a fellow crewman's life. On September 12th, Seadragon arrived on station and commenced patrolling the steamer lanes west of Macclesfield Bank. At dusk on September 16th, she headed for Cape Varela. Not until the 22nd of September, however, while off Cam Bay, was she able to gain a firing position on a suitable target. On that morning, she launched 4 torpedoes at a cruiser escorted by 2 destroyers. No explosions were heard, but her torpedoes were seen, and the enemy ships turned on Seadragon and delivered a well-executed depth charge attack. A week later, on the night of the 29th of September, the submarine tracked a 5-ship convoy, and at 01:22 on September 30th, conducted a surface torpedo attack which damaged 1 ship. She then ran eastward to attain a position ahead of the convoy, but was spotlighted by an escort which had shifted stations. Seadragon went deep. The escort dropped 6 depth charges and then rejoined the convoy. The submarine surfaced and attempted to make up for lost time. 3 hours later, she had overheated her main motor cables and was forced to give up the chase. On the evening of October 3rd, Seadragon departed the South China Sea and 5 days later commenced patrolling the approaches to Balikpapan. On October 10th, she attained a position for a stern tube shot on Shigure Maru. The cargoman disappeared 47 seconds after the first explosion. On October 11th, the submarine patrolled off Cape William and Cape Mandar. On October 12th, she was off Makassar City. On October 14th, she transited Lombok Strait, and on October 20th, she returned to Fremantle. Refit was started by submarine tender Holland at Fremantle and completed by tenders Griffin and Fulton at Brisbane. On November 23rd, she departed the latter and headed for the Bismarck Archipelago for her 5th war patrol. On November 29th, she entered her area and commenced patrolling the Rabaul Shortland routes. On December 1st, she closed the New Britain coast to intercept traffic to the Japanese beachhead at Buna, and during the next 10 days, conducted several unsuccessful approaches on enemy formations. On the morning of December 11th, she sighted a freighter with one escort rounding Cape St. George and launched 2 torpedoes at the merchantman. One hit under the main mast, damaging but not sinking the target. The escort delivered a depth charge attack, then took the damaged vessel under tow for Rabaul. Enemy planes prohibited Seadragon from delivering the coup de grace. On December 21st, Seadragon sighted an enemy submarine near Cape St. George, made her approach, and launched 3 torpedoes at the target. The first missed ahead, the second exploded about 18 seconds after firing. The third torpedo hit the target. Seadragon observed I-4's bow rising vertically as she sank stern first, resulting in the loss of all 90 crew members. The second torpedo explosion, however, had damaged Seadragon. The force of the explosion had knocked down the personnel in the forward torpedo room, and the final bow torpedo in number 1 tube, the outer door of which was open, was forced against the tail buffer. The countermining effect forced the torpedo forward, shearing off the guide stud and tripping the starting lever. The outer door could not be closed. Depth control was lost. The final bow torpedo was fired. Control was regained as the torpedo exploded on Seadragon's port quarter at an estimated 200 yards. On December 25th, Seadragon damaged another cargo man and, on December 26th, departed the area for Pearl Harbor, where she arrived on January 7, 1943. From Pearl Harbor, Seadragon continued on to the west coast, where skipper Pete Ferrall was detached to the Bureau of Ships. Between the 16th of January and the 8th of April, she underwent overhaul at Mare Island, receiving new batteries and radar and changing the position of her 3-inch mount from aft to a forward position. In mid-April, she sailed west again, and on May 9th, she departed Pearl Harbor for her 6th war patrol. On May 15th, Seadragon, now under Royal L. Rudder, crossed the 180th meridian and moved toward Micronesia. On May 19th, she commenced patrolling in the Caroline Islands. On the 20th of May, she surprised and was in turn surprised by sighting a surface submarine on a parallel course. The other submarine submerged immediately. On May 22nd, she took up station off the Truk Islands and for the next 11 days patrolled the sea lanes to the major enemy anchorage enclosed by Dublon, Pfeffon, and Uman Islands. On June 4th, she departed Truk and moved eastward to reconnoiter Ponape, thence proceeded into the Marshall Islands to patrol the sea lanes converging on Kwajalein. There the enemy's omnipresent surface and aerial escorts inhibited hunting, but on June 13th, Seadragon was able to damage a freighter. 4 days later, she cleared the area, and on June 21st she arrived at Midway Island, whence she returned to Pearl Harbor for repairs to her steering gear. From the 18th of July to 30th of August, Seadragon conducted her 7th war patrol. Of the 44 days, 31 were spent on station near Wake and in the Marshall Islands, where increased enemy air activity again hindered hunting and limited Seadragon's score to 5 freighters damaged. In mid-August, she reconnoitered Wocha, and at the end of the month, she returned to Pearl Harbor. On her 8th war patrol, the 24th of September to the 5th of November, Seadragon again returned to the Marshall Islands and spent 31 days hunting in the sea lanes to Kwajalein. Again, Japanese anti-submarine measures hindered hunting, and of the 5 ship contacts made, only 2 could be developed and only 1 attack was made. On October 13th, she damaged an enemy transport. Seadragon's 9th War Patrol, the 14th of December 1943 to the 5th of February 1944, took her back to the Caroline Islands where she hunted enemy shipping on the Truk-Saipan route and damaged 2, possibly 3, cargomen. Refit brought the replacement of Seadragon's 3-inch deck gun with a 4-inch gun, and on April 1st, she cleared Pearl Harbor for the Japanese home islands for her 10th War Patrol, with James H. Ashley, Jr. at the helm. On April 5th, she crossed the international date line. On April 15th, she entered Japanese waters. On April 16th, she moved past Oshima and, that night, commenced patrolling off the Bungo Strait and key channel entrances to the inland sea. On the morning of April 23rd, she sighted 4 freighters, escorted by 3 patrol boats, moving toward Shionomisaki. She closed the convoy, fired on the 3rd ship, the heaviest laden, then went deep and rigged for depth charging. The patrol boats moved toward Seadragon as Daiju Maru sank and, during the next 2 hours, delivered a 40-depth charge attack. Later that day, the submarine conducted an unsuccessful attack on a naval auxiliary, and, on April 26th, she moved out into the Tokyo-Manila shipping lanes, where she damaged a freighter on April 27th. On April 28th, she commenced patrolling the Nagoya-Saipan route. In May, she took station off the entrance to Sugurawan, and on May 3rd shifted to the Tokyo-Guam-Saipan Truk sea lanes. 2 days later, she hunted enemy traffic at the entrance to Sagami-Wan. On May 13th, she headed for Midway Island. On May 17th, she caught an armed trawler in a surface attack, set it afire with 4-inch gun salvos, then closed the target to take off the uniformed enemy crew. The surviving crew members refused to surrender, and Seadragon continued eastward. On May 21st, she crossed the 180th meridian and stopped at Midway, then got underway for Pearl Harbor, arriving on May 25th. Re-engined at Mare Island during the summer, Seadragon returned to Pearl Harbor on the 7th of September and departed on her 11th war patrol, a coordinated patrol, or wolf pack, with submarines Shark and Blackfish on September 23rd. She arrived at Saipan to top off on October 3rd. On October 4th, Shark and Blackfish continued on to the Wolfpack's assigned area in the northern China Sea. Seadragon, delayed by the need for repairs, did not depart until October 5th. On October 9th, she arrived off Bataan Island, established contact with Shark and Blackfish, and took position in a scouting line in the pack's assigned area. On the night of October 21st and the morning of October 22nd, the group went after an enemy warship formation led by an aircraft carrier. At 06:15 on October 24th, Shark reported a contact, and Seadragon headed for the scene. At 07:30, the contact was sighted through the high periscope, but it proved too distant. At 09:20, Seadragon sighted 3 enemy merchantmen in a loose column with a torpedo boat destroyer and an airplane as escorts. At 10:55, she launched 4 torpedoes at the lead freighter. The first torpedo broached and ran erratic, alerting the escort, which started for Seadragon. Seadragon rigged for depth charging. Soon thereafter, 2 torpedo explosions were heard, and at 11:01, the first of 8 depth charges was dropped. At 11:54, Seadragon went to periscope depth. The escort was milling around, picking up survivors 4 miles astern. The remaining merchant ships were ahead of the submarine and making only 2 or 3 knots. As Seadragon prepared to fire again, the destroyer rejoined the formation. At 11:14, Seadragon fired 4 more torpedoes. 3 hits were observed. The submarine's second target of the day sank in less than 2 minutes. Seadragon went deep. 15 depth charges followed. At 13:10, the submarine returned to periscope depth. The deck of the sole remaining freighter was crowded. The freighter was smoking heavily and moving slowly. The escort circled the freighter. At 14:04, Seadragon fired. The first torpedo tore off the freighter's bow. The rest of the ship went under quickly. At 14:05, the first of 25 depth charges was dropped. Post-war examination of Japanese records identified the sunken ships as the cargo ship, Aiko Maru, and the passenger cargo men Titan Maru and Kokuryu Maru. At 18:58, Seadragon tried unsuccessfully to raise Shark. She had been sunk after attacking the contact of her 06:15 transmission. On October 26th, Seadragon headed toward Luzon. On the 27th and 28th of October, she searched for downed aviators, and on October 29th, she was ordered to return to Midway. Arriving at her destination on November 8th, she commenced refit, and on December 3rd, she headed west for her 12th war patrol. The patrol took her back into Japanese waters where she hunted enemy shipping and searched for downed aviators into January 1945. On January 10th, she moved into the Bonin Islands, where she continued those two roles. On January 19th, she set a southerly course, and on January 22nd, she arrived at Guam to complete her last war patrol. The next day, Seadragon continued on to Pearl Harbor and, after refit, returned to California to provide training services to naval air units. In May, she was transferred back to the Atlantic Fleet and for the final months of the war, provided training services at Guantanamo Bay and Key West, Florida. In September, she moved north to New London, Connecticut, thence to Boston, Massachusetts, where she was decommissioned on November 15, 1945. Less than 4 months later, on the 8th of February 1946, she was recommissioned to assist in the inactivation and preservation of submarines, including U-boats, at Hingham, Massachusetts. On October 29, 1946, she was again decommissioned and berthed as a unit of the Atlantic Reserve Fleet, where she remained until stricken from the Naval Vessel Register on April 30, 1948, ending an illustrious career. Seadragon was credited with sinking 10 Japanese ships with a displacement of 43,450 tons during the Second World War, earning 11 battle stars.